But I also love Naughty Dog, and so it's like,
sure.
If you wanted to do something, I'm sorry you didn't get to do the thing you wanted to do.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So the Asus ROG Ally, the supposed Steam Deck killer, the handheld from Asus, made its way out this month. In May, made its way out, and got some bad reviews when it came to the battery life. So much so that around 10% of the pre-orders were canceled.
Wow.
And so they said that the ROG Ally's battery life was coming in somewhere around the 4-hour mark, which to me, holding something seems like a long time. But I think it's when you hold something, play it, put it down, hold something, play it, and it's dying that second time. Where the Steam Deck, which has got the same size battery, is closer to 7 hours.
Oh, yep.
Which is a big difference.
Is it really?
And I plug it in every time I play it, so it's hard for me to tell. But I will say this: when I'm like remote playing, the way it handles its power consumption is pretty great. It uses barely any battery when you're remote playing because it's not having to do anything, and it acts accordingly. And so Asus's director of consumers is definitely letting people know that they're listening and they're trying to adjust some software. The problem is, one of the things they're trying to do is, his name's Fu. His last name's Fu, or Fu, F-U.
Whoa.
Fu. Yeah, sorry. I don't mean you.
Okay.
By the time customers get the Ally in hand, they'll have the ability to turn off some of the AMD Z1 Extreme processor's 8 cores during gameplay. That, to me, sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
Right.
First off, why would you want to?
Well, and it's like, I've got to go in and turn off processors to help the battery life?
No.
Like, just for the regular, because you want to, the consumer, you want to be just everybody, right? Like, just anybody pick up and play this thing. And it's like, so if you don't know how to do that thing, then you're going to have the lower battery life. I think it's a huge mistake. The only reason I talk about this is, number one, the Steam Deck, and because Fu, I don't know how you say his name, goes on to praise, it's got to be Fu, goes on to praise the Steam Deck and how it handles its power, and he's definitely kind of like, we kind of maybe have fumbled this, but hopefully by the time it gets out to everybody, it'll be better. But Sony had some information come out about Project Q saying that its battery life might only be around 3 or 4 hours. And this is a way bad idea because it's just a streaming device. As I just mentioned, the Steam Deck feels like it goes forever because it's not under its own power. It's only using the Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So if this like dedicated remote play machine only has a 3 to 4 hour battery life, that is really bad.
Yes.
And so this is still a little bit in rumor insiderville because we don't know a lot about Project Q. But I was like, man, for these handhelds, which is, again, it's hard because I've never sat and played for 4 hours on a handheld. I don't think ever. Right. But it is the play, put it down, pick it back up. You don't want it to be dead. That's where it kind of comes into play. Sorry for saying play so many times. But it made me think too of you guys, and I was like, would Ed, Tim, or Chris ever go back to a handheld? Is there a handheld in the world that you would ever go back to, Ed?
Probably not. I mean, the Wii U is probably the only handheld I had, and we never played it handheld.
Yeah. Chris, do you see yourself ever jumping back into the handheld world? Because I know you tried with the Nintendo Lite, but it was like the light switch, and you were like,
yeah, I had the light switch still.
Thing, right?
I have my Vita still. Honestly, I break out the Vita more than I do the light switch. But even those, it's like, because there are certain games on there that I really like playing there, like Runner 2. I think that's the perfect place to play that game. So if I get an itch to play that, that's where I go. But no, I don't really have any interest in a new handheld, and the Sony, was it Project Q? One of the other aspects of it, forgive me if you were going to touch on this, but I read a different article, I think, than the one that you had posted, that it was saying that, yeah, and literally, like, that's all that it is the remote play device. It is not going to have any ability to connect to the cloud. Everything it plays is remote played off of the PS5. So
okay, well, let me ask you this, though. But that's a software change, right? Like, you would imagine, say the backlash is huge on that news.
Sure.
I would think that's as easy as a software change. It's got to be.
Maybe, but maybe not. And I had mentioned that back when we talked about it during all the big talk about the event, was like, if this thing can't, I already feel like this thing is hovering in L-Town. And then I was like, if it can't even do any cloud streaming, like if it literally can only play stuff remote play off the PS5, like that's the biggest L you could take. And then you add on if it's got horrible battery life, which quite frankly, while I agree it's horrible, it's not surprising to me. It's just a screen attached to a DualShock. A DualShock doesn't have DualSense doesn't have amazing battery life. I don't personally care because I have two, and the minute one gets low, I just turn it off, move it over, and I move it. Like it almost does. Right. It's almost like just like moving my arm. It's just so it happenstance. I just do it all the time. But like if I were someone who sits like across the room at a TV, I would probably be getting annoyed. But I don't, because I play right here at my desk. So the fact that all the mock-ups that we've seen of it is just a DualSense widened with a flat screen in the middle. I wasn't expecting it to have I was expecting it to have more than that, but I wasn't thinking it was going to be like night and day difference. Yeah. So it's like, I say that to say I believe that that's probably what it is, at least in its current state, because it's just a DualSense with a screen attached in the middle of it. Like,
well, and for the mock-ups we've seen, you're like, where would you put a bigger battery anyway? Considering they're saying, and it's got all the haptics of the DualSense, and you're like, okay, so if it's got all those guts,
sure,
then where do you put a bigger battery?
Is behind the screen, and since all we've seen are like renderings, you don't know how thick the thing's actually going to be. So it's possible they could shove more battery behind there, but I don't know. It doesn't sound like that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Tim, do you see yourself ever going down the handheld route?
Well, I did with the Wii U, and I did enjoy playing Mario Kart at that time. But I like the big screen. I'm old school. I like the big screen TV, the headphones. Yep. I just.
That's not old school. That's normal.
It's normal, right? But like, I want it big. I want it right here. I want it I want immersiveness. As I always say in all the press conferences, I want an immersive experience, and I just don't think you get that with handheld. And innovative with the synergy of all of the developers around it. So, I need my video games to be the way they should be played,
large and in charge.
Large and in charge, exactly.
Yeah, I like it.
The one thing that I will say about the Project Q thing that at least gave me a brief moment of like, maybe, is because one of the things that I personally have not liked about any handheld I've ever had is especially if it's one that's used for like a remote play type thing, is because they're all handheld devices. Sure, maybe it has dual analog sticks, but they're little bitty baby sticks. And so it doesn't feel the same. And I got to change all my settings on my game because I don't have as much throw. And the one thing that I did think was like, since this Project Q is essentially a DualSense, at least it's got normal analog stick size. So in theory, it should be seamless. Like you shouldn't have, and if you're like the type of person like me that uses, the control freaks to extend the right stick, like I could slap one of those on there. So I was like, maybe if it comes out and it gets decent reviews, I could see myself maybe using it, and because I'm only going to be in my house anyways, ever using it. I was like, maybe.
Yeah.
And I'm still like loosely in the maybe camp. I'm always like a let's wait and see kind of thing. I'm not a hard no on this. But I do know myself, and I do know that 9 times out of 10 I buy a handheld and I use it very, very little. And so I don't see this being a big priority for me.
Yeah.